What's up, Degenerate Nation? Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast presented by BetMGM. This is the weekend college basketball betting preview. I'm Stuckey, and joining me, as always, is BJ Cunningham and Mike Calabrese. Gentlemen, what's going on? BJ, I'll start with you. How are things?
Things are good. You know, we're getting into the thick of things. Now we have 165 college basketball games this weekend, so it's going to be complete chaos.
Yeah, nothing better than these Friday nights getting ready for the enormous Saturday college basketball card and then trying to whittle down your card from 1 million to 100,000 bets. Mike, what's going on, brother?
I'm having a pretty good week, but you know how this goes in terms of winning games by the hook or winning, by one when foul shooting goes your way down the stretch. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop a little bit. I hit Longwood last night, and they end up erasing a pretty big first half deficit and make a foul shot at the end, play enough defense to cover by the hook. But I don't know. I'd like some sweat-free wins, hopefully, this weekend that we can hand out to the audience. Creighton did their work on Tuesday, which was great to see in terms of how they handled Butler. But just in general, I think it's still so unpredictable with so many top 25 teams losing this week. We'll get into it a little bit, but at this point, my big headline is who can you trust on the road? And at this point, it's a pretty short list.
Yeah, I guess let's break right into that. But let's first just to give an idea of what this is going to look like. Obviously, this is the first late week episode of this season. So if you're not familiar, we'll do a little, recap of what we learned from the week, one takeaway. If you have a rant, we'll get to that. And we'll talk a little Friday night hoops and give out a play or two there. And then we will get into some futures talk. And also, and what we're going to do with the futures, we're going to build a futures portfolio over the next 6 weeks. 5 or 6 weeks, we'll have 5 or 6 teams try to hit at least one every week. Everyone will bring one to the table, make a case for it, and then we will vote. And you don't have to have all 5 or 6 if you're listening. You can pick and choose. So it's just a good way to offer up some cases for futures. We'll get into Saturday, go around the horn, 3 or 4 picks each. And then later in the show, I'm actually going to talk with BJ Rains, who does a phenomenal job covering Boise State. We'll talk a little Mountain West. I'll interview him a little later in the day. So jam-packed show. If you have any ideas for guests, feel free to always reach out, especially if they specialize in a certain conference. But let's get right into just one key takeaway from the week. I'm gonna go with last night's UConn loss. They blow a 17-point lead. And if you were to ask somebody like a month ago who's gone to the Final Four, I don't know, maybe people that follow college basketball closely, a lot of answers would be Arizona and UConn, right? Those two teams with their bigs, they look like shoo-ins to make a run in March. And since they've fallen off, kind of some of the same problems. Their guards aren't, their shots aren't falling. UConn's bench has fallen off a little bit. They have some issues on defense as well. And so everything was going really well for them early on. Now, not so much. I think they were playing over their heads. But I think it illustrates more of a point of the entire landscape of college basketball this year, and that is just be in the mix. Like Connecticut will be in the mix with their size, and they're going to have to make some shots. They're still young, but there is no dominant team. There's going to be ebbs and flows of this, and it's going to lead into our futures talk later. Like you want to try and time it up right when you're getting in on some of these teams for futures, but maybe Samson Johnson come back for Connecticut can help, but yeah, Sanogo on defense has been a little disappointed. They got to get their rotations right. And then, everything, Calcaterra was hitting like 60% from 3 earlier in the year. Everything was going right. They weren't that good. I don't think they're this bad, but I think it just speaks to college basketball in general this year. Be in the mix. There's 20 teams that could win this thing. Mike, let me go to you.
Yeah, I agree. And there's also so many top teams that could lose in the first weekend. Just looking at this week, Kansas, Texas, Clemson, Xavier, TCU, you touched on UConn, Arkansas also losing. Most of those losses coming at home, or pardon me, on the road. And that's really what it boils down to. Can any of these teams be consistent if their strength isn't happening that night, whether it's perimeter shooting or they're
Xavier at DePaul. Xavier goes down to DePaul.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing where I think it cuts both ways in terms of the overreaction to a loss like that. Xavier cracks the top 10, they lose. Are they fraudulent, or is it just that DePaul finally got healthy at the right time and maybe they're a team to consider as a dark horse in the Big East tournament? I think at this point, kind of what you're preaching a little bit in terms of having patience and looking at a team's, best and worst performance and realizing that somewhere in the middle is probably the right patience to have at this point in the season. Although there are some teams that I feel like at this point they got to show me something, and that's why this TCU Kansas game is so critical in my opinion over the weekend. Even if TCU isn't able to win the game, I just want to make sure that they don't get thrown to the mat and have a 3 or 4 game losing streak come out of that loss to West Virginia, because we all knew that West Virginia was better than their record indicated. They were winless in the Big 12, but I want to see how these teams react after dropping a game on the road.
Yeah, good thing to keep in mind is like the 25-5 rule. Like there's teams that are going to have like 5 games that are way over their head, 5 games that it's a bad day, and then 20 games you're like who they actually are, and you don't want to overreact, and sometimes you want to take advantage of the market if the market does indeed overreact or underreact in certain circumstances. It's also worth noting you always want to keep track of like who's in and who's out. Like you mentioned, DePaul getting healthy, that's important. There's also there's couple more COVID cases are creeping up. Like people are out for COVID and sickness and illness and injuries. So that's something to also keep in mind. BJ, let me throw it to you. Key takeaway from the week.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of echoing on what you guys have both already said. It's that it seems like there are very few teams in this country that you can trust both at home and on the road. And it's, to echo your point from Monday, Michael, it's a lot of teams just are doing a lot of good stuff at home, and then they just keep losing on the road. Like you already mentioned, Kansas losing to Kansas State, Missouri beating Arkansas, West Virginia beating TCU, and UConn. That's 4 straight road losses for them. So like you said, Stug, they were the 3rd team in the country. And a lot of people, I remember being on Green Dot Daily talking with Kai McEwen from a 3-man weave, and he was telling me, he's like, yeah, I think UConn's the best team in the country. And then they go on and they lose to Providence and drop 3 straight road games. So now once we get to March, they kind of got to keep that in mind is when you're picking out your futures portfolio. And this will be a nice segue into the, the futures talk, is that there are currently 8 teams from 10-1 to 20-1. Houston's sitting at 6-1. They're not going to be tested during the American conference. So there's probably not going to be value on them as we get through the regular season here, but maybe they drop a few games. Maybe there becomes some value on them. But Kansas, Alabama, Purdue, UCLA, Arizona, Tennessee, Gonzaga, Connecticut. Out of that bunch, which one of those teams do you guys actually trust the most to get through this regular season and potentially have their price be shorter by the time we get March? Honestly, because that's what we're talking about here with futures.
I'll answer first. I think that from a price perspective, if I were to, and we'll talk about this later, it might not be my answer. But from that group, the team that I trust the most to win it all, and they might be at the peak of their value, is what I mean, is Alabama. Right. If you look at what they've done this year, I think I talked about this earlier in the week with that road win at Houston. The road win at Arkansas, it was a desperate Arkansas team. They kept taking their punches. Another double-digit road win at Vandy, double-digit road win at Mississippi State. The road win at Houston is huge, and these are road conference games, and they're just taking care of business in on the road in conference. So, yeah, I think with the amount of talent that they have, the amount of ways that they can score, the veteran presence of Mark Sears, I think, is huge. Knowing when to take the big shot. There's so much talent in this team. They can beat you in so many ways. And we talked about these teams not having marquee wins on the road. Alabama has one of the best, and they keep getting it done on conference in the road. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I kind of want to go a little bit deeper on Alabama because it's something that you talked about last episode when kind of singing their praises and what they did against Houston. For those of you that watched the entire game, it wasn't an Alabama game where they hit 15 threes and they legitimately would have beaten any team in the country. They're down at halftime. They were struggling at points in that game, and they gutted it out against a really good defense on the road. To me, that arguably is the most impressive win of the entire season. So it's not just
with Brandon Miller, their star freshman, doing nothing in the game.
Right, exactly. So it's your 25-5-5 rule. It wasn't even that 5 game where it's like, okay, they shot out of their minds, or they got, the benefit of some whistles, or something really weird happened in the game. They were just able to gut out a win. And you have to have at least one, probably 2 of those on a trip to the national championship in March anyway. So in terms of being able to prove it, I'm with you there. I think that's the correct answer. Although I'll get into it a little bit later. Arizona's inching closer to my buyback moment. The fact that they lost to Oregon, I'll touch on this as well. Oregon had a personnel upgrade in terms of Couisnard coming in. And I think that's something that's really underrated. And the fact that he was able to go off from a scoring perspective in that game kind of dressed up a Oregon team that on paper is kind of mediocre. I think they're going to be absolutely in the hunt and potentially could win the Pac-12 tournament. So Arizona, to me, can get it together. I think they do this weekend with the doubleheader at home against USC and then UCLA. I think that that's going to be their springboard to get their mojo back a little bit, and they play so well at McHale. But it's not quite there for me. I think you listed off at 14-1. If it gets into that 17, 18-1 area, then I think it's the opportunity to grab the Wildcats.
Well, I guess before we get to Friday, it's probably a natural segue into the future segment. So let's just knock that out now. So everyone is going to bring one future. Let's pull up. We could talk widely, lines that are in the range, because and this is an important point. You want to shop around in college basketball futures. You can find, log into, if you have 3 different books, log into 3. They're probably not going to be the same. Why give up that free equity? Which is why it's important to have as many outs as possible. Of course, starting with BetMGM, our sponsor. So let's, BJ, I'll let you start. Which future are you bringing to the table for this week?
I'm going to bring to the table Connecticut at 20-1. I know we just talked about them losing 4 straight road games, but I'm thinking this is about the point at the largest number that we're going to see on Connecticut going forward. This is an unbelievable team.
Wait, before you keep going, I think this is a horrendous take because this is the case that I prepared. So,
oh really?
Anyway,
okay, well, I'll pivot then. You know what?
No, keep going. I have a backup. I have a backup.
Monday, because I'll just say
I have a backup.
Creighton's still sitting there at 50-1. Like, there is tremendous value on Creighton right now. They obviously just beat Butler pretty badly, a team that has the number 1 strength of schedule.
BJ, you're going UConn. You got it. We have to stick to the order because I'm going to start some weeks. So you brought UConn.
Right.
You can't
UConn
mess with the order.
Yeah, I mean, this is about the point to buy in, right? Because we had the peak of the market when they were the 3rd team in the country. I'm guessing, I don't have it in front of me, I'm guessing they were probably around 10-1, 9-1 to win the title. They have 4 straight road losses in the Big East. It's a team that's probably going to be, at very worst, a 4 seed come March. Unbelievable team at defending the 3-point area. They have a couple really, really nice non-conference wins, including one over Alabama, a team we just raved about. So absolutely probably the time to buy in here on UConn going forward. So UConn 20-1 for me is my future I'm bringing to the table.
Okay. Mike, throw it to you.
All right, I'm going to try to throw in a deep shot because for the most part, I'm shopping in more that 15 to 50-1 range throughout the season. Just mentioned him. Oregon, 150. I've seen out in the market 175-1. We know about the coaching staff, what they can bring to the table. But to me, at this point, anyone over 100-1, is there a personnel difference, whether it's a player, getting hurt, coming back from injury, transfer portal, eligibility, whatever it is. Jermaine Couisnard is the guy that is a missing piece for them on the perimeter. Because when you balance him with N'Faly Dante, the Molly monster, who's been absolutely insane since January rolled around. His last 4 games, he's averaging 16 points, 9 boards, 3 stocks per game. He's taken his game to the next level. But getting another perimeter threat to pair with Richardson, I think it gives them an opportunity to take that Arizona win and build on it, have a top 4 finish in the regular season in the Pac-12. I understand that they've been uneven at times already here in January, but their ceiling to me is being right on the cusp of being a top 3 team in the Pac-12, and 150 to 1 value wise is right there for me. Also a team that has put it together in the past, later in the season, and made deep runs in March Madness. So I've seen the evidence from the coaching staff. So I'm going to go ahead with the Ducks if you can get it at a real good number.
All right, for my future that I'm bringing to the table, it's going to be UConn. So I like the case there. And Oregon, look, always going to be an interesting tournament team. They get into the dance with the way that they play. Dana Altman can switch up defenses, zone to man to press. Very tough team to prepare for on a quick turnaround, especially if you're not familiar with them. And yeah, that is something to also keep in mind if someone is getting a key player back to look for in the futures market. Let me bring, I'm going to make a case for TCU at some point, but we're going to talk about this game later. They're going to be underdogs against Kansas, and maybe we can pick them back up. They've come really far down in the futures market. So even though they just lost at West Virginia in a tough spot, I think that they're not going to go up way higher, and we might be able to pick them off later. So I'm going to go with a team that made me look dumb on Wednesday because I talked about adding their future. So I'm going to talk about Ohio State. You can still find 80 to 1 out there. They just lost to Nebraska by a possession after they lost to Rutgers by 4 in overtime, after they lost to Minnesota by possession. Lost to Purdue by 2. This is a team that's lost 5 in a row, I think all by 1 possession. And I still believe in them. I mean, this is a team that's, I think, top 10 adjusted offensive efficiency. They're very well coached. They're not 3-point reliant. They're great on the offensive glass. I think Sensabaugh can be that guy as we progress into March, to be that guy who can take over. I think that they've just been getting really unlucky. And I do believe that they're one of the 20 best teams in the country. So I think that when all said and done, they're going to be in the mix. I think they're still are they top 20 in KenPom? Like they're 21st in KenPom. I think that this is, if you're going to add Ohio State, do it now, looking at their schedule. And yeah, I think 80 to 1 for a team that I think is top 20 in the country with a guy who I think can emerge as that go-to guy. Let's go Buckeyes. So now it's time to vote. We just hold up one finger. When I say 1, 2, 3, one finger for BJ's, 2 for Mike's. So 1 for UConn, 2 for Oregon, 3 for Ohio State and you can't vote for yourself. On the count of 3, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I was wondering if this was a Georgia Senate runoff situation. Are we going to be able to get it down to just 2?
I am the ultimate seniority here. If everyone goes 1 to 1 to 1, I make the decision. In which case I might just choose my own. So it's not the fair system, but it looks like 2 of us have chosen Connecticut. I agree. Within, there's a 20, we'll call it 22 to 1. I think you might be able to find a 24 to 1 out there. This is a team that I think will be in the mix. They have the size to give a lot of teams problems. And by the way, they've lost some road games in the Big East. You remove Georgetown, which, man, I wish that team was good. College basketball is better when Georgetown is good. But Big East teams not named Georgetown, 90-16 at home this year. 85% home conference winning percentage. That's insane. The home court advantage, I always think the Big 12 is the best. But the Big East, underrated home court advantage, especially this year. But yeah, this has got to be the bottom for UConn. Like we just talked about a month ago, this was a team that everyone was like a shoo-in for the Final Four. That was way ahead of itself. But this is a top 20 team that could be a matchup problem. And they're young. I think that they're going to get better. They're getting a piece back in an opening day starter who's been out, who's just participating in live drills. So yeah, I think good time to buy UConn. But I think, I guess I can't speak for myself, but 2 good cases that you guys brought. Mike, do you have any comments here?
No, I think the only thing that really popped to mind was what you're saying about TCU. Now's not the right time to grab them if you're interested, because I do think that they're going to fall at Fog on Saturday, which theoretically should mean that could bump them up, from wherever they are by about 5 points on the futures market. So it's probably best to wait that out, unless you think for sure that they're going to go in and bust the upset, in which case you could kind of take the future now and then play them on the money line as well. But I'm not sure that's the tactic to deploy at this point.
Yeah, you also could, some of these things, like there's in investing, which I recommend doing, like dollar cost averaging in the market. Like no one knows the time of the markets. If you're going to invest like for retirement or long term, like you just, no matter what the market's doing, you invest a little bit over time. If there's a team, in the Big 12 and you're like, there's a big upset coming, and say you wanted to bet, say you wanted to bet $100 in the future, but you could bet, 30 today, and then you could bet 30 next week or 30 in 2 weeks. You don't have to bet the entire thing. You can wait and see and kind of diversify in that aspect. But yeah, it might not be the best time for TCU, and TCU, regardless, if they that win against Kansas, like you go to Kansas, that's a quad one game. Like their profile gets strengthened overall. All right, good stuff there. Let's move on to Friday. Talk a little Friday Night Lights. It's they're never going to be the most. It's not going to be a card with the most amount of volume on a Friday night until we get into conference play, but we can try to find a winner or two. BJ, I know that Mike has something for New Mexico, Boise potential. Do you have anything for Friday?
I do. Let's go to the MAAC, the MAAC. Canisius taking on Fairfield. I think this is a pretty good matchup for Fairfield at home. Ken Palm has a -4. The biggest thing in this matchup is Canisius takes a large number of 3-point shots. Fairfield's a top 50 team in the country at defending 3-pointers, whether it be open, catch and shoot, off the dribble, whatever it is. Fairfield is very, very good at defending threes. Fairfield also runs a ton of ball screens and pick and rolls on offense, and Canisius is outside the top 250 at defending those. And Fairfield just due for a lot of positive shooting regression. Like if you look at their effective field goal percentage and 3-point field goal percentage, it's actually really, really bad. But if you look at their shot quality numbers, they should be about 3 or 4% higher in every single type of shot. So I think this is a good spot for them going up against a team that likes to shoot a lot of threes, a team that's very, very good at defending threes at home at a short number at -4.
Yeah, I'm going to say it's worth keeping an eye on the status of Caleb Fields, who hasn't played the past 2 games, but I think he's probably trending towards playing. He's probably arguably their best playmaker, averages, but I think like 12 or 13 points per game. But I was really impressed, and it was something that I kind of noted for later when they went to Iona and Fields didn't play that game. And they were right there all the way until the end. And they only shot 5 of 20 from 3. So yeah, I was impressed by Fairfield the other week. But the status of Fields, I think, because they last played on Sunday and he was like questionable. So I would think that he would probably give it a go. And he's an important piece. Mike, what do you got here?
So one of the best mid-major games of the week, really of the month, is Boise traveling to the Pit to take on New Mexico. At this point,
the Pit is back. The Pit has always been a fire, but now the Pit is like a fire pit.
Yes, absolutely. And Bracket Matrix has both of these teams in the field at this point. Boise as a 10 and New Mexico as a 9 seed. The winner here, I think, positions themselves with the inside track in the Mountain West, regular season race. And potentially, if everything cuts, properly for the winner, you could play your way up to like a 6 seed if you are able to do the 2-step of the conference regular season title and the conference tournament title as well. I could talk myself into either one of these teams, but I think what's going to happen is that New Mexico is going to speed up the tempo. So I'm interested in the over on this one. Boise has 3 scorers who pump in over 13 per game, and Rice, Shaver Jr., and Genhart. So I really like what they bring to the table. And even though Jalen House is one of my favorite mid-major players in the whole country, he's not a one-man show. He's got Mashburn Jr., he's got Udezi. So I think this is going to be an offensive showcase. And the fact that Boise prefers to play slower, but has the weaponry to be able to keep up, I think the fact that the home court advantage is going to pump up the Lobos, trying to put on a show for their home fans. I think we're going to see a little bit of an up-tempo match. So I'm going to see this probably in the 150s as opposed to where Boise would prefer to play it, which is probably the low 140s.
Yeah, don't forget about Alec, too, the UMKC Kangaroo transfer for New Mexico. He does so many other little things for them and just kind of puts everything together. But House is amazing to watch. I've never seen a guy with as much intensity on every single play as him. And yeah, I'm glad that he has help now. And both these teams should be shoo-ins for the NCAA tournament. I won't comment too much more on this game because we're going to talk with BJ later about the Mountain West, and we'll obviously talk about this game and that Boise offense, which has been on fire. And you're right, New Mexico, they want to get out and they want to run. And Boise they just have shooters all over and so many guys that can make shots. So we'll talk a little bit more about that game later on. All right, good stuff. We got Friday. We got UConn Future, first of our portfolio. We got some Friday night lights. Oh, I have to go. I didn't even go for my Friday night pick. Rusty on these late week episodes. I'm gonna go with Richmond at home, where they've been awesome all year, night and day, home and road team this year. At home against VCU, probably catching a point. It'll be right around a pick. As long as it's a pick, -1 or +1, I think it's fine. They've actually been good against the press this year, which is important against VCU. VCU is also not the same strong, dominant team in the interior, especially on the glass, that they've had in recent years, where they can just bully Richmond. And VCU is shooting like 47% from three in conference play. And Richmond's about at 29%. Richmond's the better shooting team. So I think there's some shooting regression too coming for Richmond, and they've handled the press well. That's usually the key here. And I think once they get into their offense, they have some positive shooting regression at home. I think that they're going to do enough here to get the win. So give me Richmond in an 8-10 battle. Mike, you have anything here to add?
I just love that you picked the Capital City Classic. It's always nice to pick those intra-city matchups. I think from a mid-major perspective, you love to see when the fan bases are really lit up for games that beyond just the conference tournament. So this is certainly one of them. And I think you're on the right side on this one. Richmond does bring so much to the table, and Burden is just an absolute monster. So I see him probably having a huge game here.
Yeah, the Richmond, there's the Richmond doesn't force a lot of turnovers, which is good for VCU because they cough it up a lot. But Richmond is dominant on the defensive glass. So I think VCU is not going to keep shooting at this clip, and it's going to be one and done. And then, you can't set up your press. And when they do have a chance to set up their press, Richmond has showed that they don't turn the ball over a lot, and they've been good against the press per synergy this year, which I think ultimately will be the difference in what has been a really disappointing A10 this year. We'll talk about that on one of the episodes coming up when we feature a conference. But I mean, what is Bracket Matrix having the A10 having just one? Is it a one bid league right now?
I believe so. Let me check on that for you.
Probably only Dayton at this point right now.
But I mean, is even Dayton safe? I mean, they're probably just assumed.
Yeah, they basically have Dayton as the automatic bid, but they have them on the 12 line right now. So yeah, it's pretty rough for them. Davidson is only in a few brackets at this point, and that's probably being generous. So yeah, it's not a good situation for
Davidson's 2-5 in the conference. So
yeah, exactly. So I think that may be kind of
so many disappointments. Loyola is a corpse. They're 0-6. They look awful. Kennedy didn't play the other night. Dade's an interesting team because I mean, early in the year, they had some questionable results, but they were competitive, and then they lose their guards, and they kind of re-identified. They kind of like reconfigured their roster. They just were playing with a bunch of forwards. Now their bigs are so good that if they can get into their offense and get into the half court, they're going to score and they're going to rebound. But now they're getting their guards back who weren't good early in the year, so they're an interesting team to watch. But BJ, do you want to add something?
No, I was just going to say, you mentioned Dayton on the 12 line. I just had an A10 12 line flashback to Iowa losing to Richmond last year was the only thing I was going to add to that. So, but yeah, I mean, the Dayton, Dayton lost to VCU on the road, and when they were controlling the game, had a big time lead and then just collapsed at the end.
Well, that was because they had no guards. I mean,
that's
what it showed. So yeah, the VCU press finally got them. But yeah, we'll talk about the A10. Maybe have our friend PD Buckets on at some point. But let's shift gears to Saturday and talk Saturday's card. We'll go around the horn here and just fire one off at a time, and we'll go until we're done. Usually try to max it at right around 10. So BJ, let me kick it to you. What's the first game that you want to bring up?
Yeah, I'm going to bet a team that I've bet their last two games, and they just keep losing. Georgia Tech at home against Syracuse. Against NC State this week, they shot 2 of 18 from behind the arc. And then against Pittsburgh last weekend, they went 12 of 29 from behind the arc. So they showed they are a good 3-point shooting team. But in that game, They went 12 for 37 from 2-point range. And it's a team that's due for a ton of shooting regression. If you look at their shot quality numbers, they should be about 5% higher on their field goal percentage at the rim. And on post up sets, they're also 4th in the ACC in both spacing and open 3-point rate, while Syracuse is around middle of the road at defending 3-pointers. And the biggest advantage Georgia Tech's going to have in this one is they do a ton of post-up sets. Actually, the 5th highest post-up frequency team in the country, while Syracuse, they're not very good at defending those post-up sets because, mainly they're playing out of the 2-3 zone. And Syracuse, like always, they're just a really, really bad defensive rebounding team. Georgia Tech's a little bit above average there. And this is a desperation spot here for Georgia Tech. They're on a 4-game losing streak. It's their 3rd straight home game. Syracuse they take a ton of mid-range jumpers. They don't really get to the rim or shoot a lot of 3-pointers. Georgia Tech, very, very good at defending mid-range jumpers. So I think this is a good spot here for an all-in spot for Georgia Tech, who absolutely needs this one in their 3rd straight home game. So give me the Yellow Jackets, +1, pick them, whatever it is around there come Saturday.
Mike?
I think this is the right time to buy on Arizona. They score 88 points per game at McHale. I think they're going to get Bona in foul trouble. And for as much as I love UCLA, if he gets in foul trouble and he's a very aggressive defender, he's somebody who's, looking to get 3 and 4 blocks a game. If he goes to the bench early, I think there's going to be
their post D goes way down. Yeah.
So at this point, I'm going to swing for the fences on this one. I'm going to take them on the alternate line. I'll bump it all the way up to Arizona -9.5. I think they get a big win to swing the energy back in their favor for this season.
I'm going to go. Yeah, don't hate that. I think this is a time to probably buy Arizona after their recent struggles. And I mean, they can't hit an outside shot, but if you look at some of the metrics, they've just been running really bad. They're not a great shooting team, but some of those shots should start to fall, especially with the attention that their interior garners. Let's see. Let's go with TCU. They're projected to get 9. I don't think that they're going to win this game. Kansas off of a loss. I love TCU as a dog. And TCU as a dog, this core of the past 2 years, 15-5 against the spread. They just have too many dudes to be catching points. And here's in this particular matchup, and they've played Kansas really tough. You can get to the rim and score at the rim against Kansas, which is what TCU wants to do. Also, both of these teams they want to run. They want to get out in transition, and they are elite in transition. Both defenses are really good in transition, but I think both offenses are just so good that they're going to score. And this game's going to turn into up and down, which is good for TCU. And then TCU's can get on the offensive glass here. That's a weakness for Kansas. The physicality of TCU, I think, could present some problems to Kansas. And I think that TCU, look, they had that big win kind of over Kansas State, dominated them, and then they went to Morgantown against a team that was winless in conference before this Kansas State. Tough spot there. So I think you might maybe get a little bit more value in TCU, but I think that they'll bounce back, be focused here. They've demonstrated that they can, in this dog role, especially on the road, veteran team, they won't be afraid of the stage. Kansas pulls this out, but I don't think they're winning this game by double digits by any stretch. BJ?
Yeah, I'm going to go a little mid-major here. I'm going to go to Conference USA. UTEP, they're projected to be 8-point underdogs at home against Florida Atlantic. Everything's going great for Florida Atlantic right now. They've cracked the top 25 for the first time in school history. They're 15-1. But this is a good fade spot for them. We're recording this before they play on Thursday, but they're playing UTSA as one of the worst teams, not only in Conference USA, but also in the country. So they should be able to cruise by them. Listen, UTEP, they can't shoot the ball from distance to save their lives, but they are a team that is built to get the ball to the rim. They have, one of the lowest 3-point percentages in the country, but also one of the lowest 3-point rates. They also get to the free throw line at a top 20 rate, but they are shooting 58.6% from the free throw line. That's the second worst free throw percentage in the country behind only Brown. UTEP also is a top 30 team in terms of spacing, top 10 team in terms of their frequency utilizing back cuts, which Florida Atlantic has been struggling to defend. And Florida Atlantic, the reason they've been so good is they're a really, really good 3-point shooting team. They're top 50 in 3-point rate, and they're shooting a little over 35% from behind the arc. UTEP is allowing 30% from behind the arc. They're top 40, which is top 40 in the country, and UTEP defensively also top 30 in turnover percentage, allowing the third lowest open 3-point rate in Conference USA. And UTEP has been fantastic as a dog this season. They just won outright at Charlotte. They're 7-1 against the spread as an underdog. So I like Minor Nation picks up +8 at home to potentially knock off Florida Atlantic.
Yeah, some of these three should start falling. I mean, they don't have great shooters. Like I'm looking at Hardy and McKinney. Like if you look at their track record, like McKinney, for example, was like a 30% last year. He's at 13%. Hardy, 35, 36, now 33. Givens is 26% this year. Is still, he's like a 34%. So they're not a good 3-point shooting team. And by the way, they're 52% from the line in conference play. But I do think that some of their outside shots are going to start falling because nobody is making them. Let's see, Frazier is 6 of 29. He's 20%. Last year he was 37% for George Mason. So yeah, I think that there's some positive shooting regression coming if you look at the track record of some of their players. Mike, what do you got next?
One of my favorite teams to go real far down the board in terms of mid-majors, the Fighting Amy Schumers, the Towson Tigers. I love this team. They are one of the best covering teams on the road in the last 2 years in college basketball. I think they're like 13th nationally, covering at about a 70% rate. They got back-to-back road games this week. They go to North Carolina A&T on Thursday. I'm going to take them there, -6.5. And then they play a dreadful Elon team on the road on Saturday. And yes, the Towson offense can leave a little bit to be desired, but they're 4-1 in their last 5. And 2 of those games, they held their opponents under 50 points. One of them being Hofstra. In terms of like a box score that I went ahead and circled, for the week, winning 68-47 against Hofstra just doesn't make any sense if it's not for the fact that Towson's defense and pace, when they put it together, they can absolutely frustrate a team, get them so far out of rhythm. They don't give up good looks. So I could see Elon scoring sub 50 in this one as well. So I'll go ahead and lay up to 12-13 in that game. I think the Tigers are a good value there. The one other game that I wanted to discuss that's totally injury dependent is Santa Clara traveling to St. Mary's to play on Saturday. Pajemski is the key here.
He might play tonight, right? They don't know.
He may play tonight against BYU. My preference is for him to play, shake off the rust, them not to cover against BYU to get a better number on Saturday against Santa Clara, because he's obviously being a big transfer from Illinois and how well he's played in the first half of the season. He's the huge difference maker. They've made do without him in the starting lineup, but they need him to play at a superstar level to upset St. Mary's. I think he can if he goes ahead and gets the training wheels off in this game against BYU. So that's the game that I'm monitoring the most, and that would be my upset special for Saturday night.
Yeah, they're a different team with him out there. Towson, the Towson Elon game. I mean, Elon is bad, and Towson, they are. I mean, look, under Scary, they're always going to be a great offensive rebounding team. Yeah, they're top 20 offensive rebounding rate. So even if when they're like playing a team that they're clearly superior than, if they have an off shooting, and look, they're not a 3-point reliant shooting up, but even if their threes aren't, they're going to get every offensive rebound in this game. Elon is a horrendous rebounding team. Towson is going to get every board on both ends here and just suffocate them away. So yeah, I don't mind taking the Tigers as a favorite there on the road against a team that is dead, that is bad, and has a horrible home court advantage. I can't imagine a great crowd for that one. BJ?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Seton Hall. Pick them at home against Marquette. Like you already mentioned, Stuck, home court advantage in the Big East has been pretty favorable and drastic this season. And this is a good spot here for Seton Hall to pick off Marquette, who is coming off that win against Providence at home. The big thing here is that Marquette has been pretty bad defensively, and they're 92nd in adjusted defensive efficiency. They're 311th in points per possession allowed in half-court sets. They can't really defend in the mid-range very much, which is where Seton Hall takes a large percentage of their shots. And the Marquette offense has just been running really, really hot to this point in the season. So I think this is a good spot here for Seton Hall, who has been down a little bit this season, but they've been getting good shots. They have a high rim and 3-point rate. So it's a good spot to bet against the Marquette defense progressing towards the mean. So I like Seton Hall at home.
Yeah, and the problem with Seton Hall is, I mean, look, Sheet Holloway is always going to have a great defense. The guy knows how to coach. This roster is built to do that. I mean, what Tyrese Samuel did yesterday on the defense was awesome. Know about Indefo, came from St. Peter's as the rim protector. Their offense is just, it was like, what is this offense going to be? But I think lately they're starting to kind of figure out their their different roles and who they are and kind of establishing an identity. It's never going to be a great offense, but I think it's an offense that's trending up. And yeah, they're tough at home. They've won 4 in a row. I have the circle too, but Marquette beats me every time I try to fade them. But I agree. Big East teams at home right now are on a roll. Let's see, what else do I got? My favorite bet of the day for sure is I might buy low on Texas Tech, but I mean they ran into a hot Baylor team, Kansas State off that Kansas win. I mean, this is it for Texas Tech? They're winless in the Big. I mean, you kind of this is a must win. Let's see. My favorite bet by far is Vatek. I mean, Virginia Tech, they lost again. They're kind of sliding. But I watched that whole game. I liked what I saw from Virginia Tech against Virginia on the road. It was not an easy game. They were 7-point underdogs. Ended up losing by 10. But most importantly, they got Hunter Couture back for that game. He was, he limped off a little bit in the first half, but he's so important to that team, stretches opposing defenses out and gives the offense some space for guys like Mutz to operate. And, this Clemson team is played well, but I think that they've played a little bit above their heads. They're also dealing with some injuries. And this is just this spot of all spots for Virginia Tech, who's lost 6 in a row. Experienced team, great coach. They've been here before. This is basically the same exact spot that they were in last year when they caught fire and then carried that all the way through the ACC tournament, which they won into March. So I think this is the right time to buy Vatek. I think they're winning this game. You'll be probably catching a couple points. They'll take money and probably close like a pick or something. But I love Vatek on Saturday. Any comments on those games? You guys have anything else to add?
Yeah, I can. Sorry, go ahead,
Mike. I'll go to you first.
Yeah, I'll just put this out here quickly. One home court advantage in mid-major land that I really respect is the Dome of Doom out in Laramie. But this Wyoming team has fallen off the cliff. It's white flag time. No Graham Ike, no Maldonado, and Colorado State coming in on Saturday. Isaiah Stevens has really picked up every ounce of slack that he can with what they lost year over year in terms of offensive production. They nearly upset San Diego State. They lose in overtime the other night. I like what I'm seeing from them. Depends on the number, but I could see them winning by 20 plus in this game. Just Wyoming does not have the personnel to keep up, and Colorado State still has an opportunity if they make a little run to find themselves in the 3rd, 4th slot of the Mountain West packing order. If they can really start stacking up some wins, I think it starts in Laramie. For a team that's usually an incredibly difficult out, maybe we'll get lucky and have a few points worth of value baked in because sportsbooks are still respecting the altitude, but I don't really see that being a problem for the Rams here.
I also, PJ, before I go to you, I also throw out Ohio State after their losses, and Iowa's won 4 in a row. Ohio State at home here. I think it's going to end up being a pretty good spot, but maybe you're going to tell me to bet Iowa here.
No. I actually don't like Iowa on the road there. No, I was going to piggyback off Mike and say that I think I agree with him. This is the perfect spot here for Arizona. This is something we talked about last year about how the way the Pac-12 schedule works. A lot of times these teams get back-to-back road games on a Thursday and Saturday, and that's what you're finding here with UCLA. They're on a 13-game win streak before this game against Arizona State on Thursday. The best team that they've played throughout that entire stretch has been Kentucky on a neutral floor. Which we all know of their issues throughout this season. So I agree with you, Mike. This is a perfect spot to actually buy back in on Arizona because they're probably going to be an underdog here at home.
Which I think is ridiculous. I mean, I would take it, just on the regular line up to Arizona -3. But like I said, if it's a situation where if it's even a pick 'em, teasing the line up to Arizona -9.5, you could get 3-1 on a bet like that. So I think there's plenty of value to an Arizona runaway.
And Arizona's, UCLA is also a top 10 frequency team in running pick and rolls. That's why they've been so successful offensively. And Arizona's top 15 in points per possession allowed off of pick and roll. So it's a really, really good spot here for Arizona.
All right. So that'll do it for us. Thanks as always to BJ and Mike, to our audio and video teams on the back end. Thanks again to BJ Rains for joining me. Make sure you subscribe, unsubscribe, leave a review. They really help us out. We'll do some giveaways soon here. Just leave a 5-star review. Say whatever. You can trash us, but they really do help us out. Tell a friend, tell an enemy. Make sure you download the award-winning Action Network app. Thanks to our sponsor, BetMGM. It's time for us to go find some additional winners for Saturday's massive slate. Good luck to whatever you bet. And we will see you on Monday afternoon. Unlike this week with the holiday, we'll be back, episode will probably post late Monday afternoon, going through what we learned on the weekend and Monday's slate. So we'll catch y'all then. Cheers.